Welcome to The Hidden Load for the educators and leaders in medicine who hold everyone up. We will tackle the hard topics and help you conquer your chaos and get to calm, all by starting to acknowledge and remove that hidden load. This podcast is a space for us to name the things that are common but not normal. Each week, we'll look at the invisible weight you're carrying and explore practical coaching-based tools to help you find more calm, better boundaries, and a sense of purpose that doesn't require you to run on empty. I'm so glad that you've carved time out for yourself today. Let's get into the episode. Welcome back to The Hidden Load. I am your host, Dr. Santina or Tina Wheat. I'm a family physician, an educator, a leader, and a career and life coach. And today we are talking about something that sounds simple. Maybe it even sounds trendy, but it is actually deeply uncomfortable in medicine. And that topic is taking up space. I recently shared an article with SoMeDocs magazine about whether physicians are allowed to take up space, be it publicly, be it intellectually, be it emotionally, and professionally. However, today, I want to narrow this specifically to the educators and leaders in medicine, because here is what I believe. If you are leading a team, if you are running a program, if you are mentoring trainees, if you are shaping curriculum or influencing the policy, then you don't really have the option of shrinking. Not if we want to do our jobs well. And yet, many of us do. Many of us shrink. It is not because we lack the confidence. It is also not because we lack the competence, but instead, it is because we were trained inside systems that reward quiet excellence, putting our heads down and getting the work done, and systems that also punish the visible friction. And for those reasons, shrinking often feels professional. It often feels safe. It often feels like it is the way to be humble. But shrinking, it comes at a cost. And so today, I want to talk about why we shrink, why that is especially dangerous in leadership, and how we can manage to take up space without an ego, but with integrity. Now, I want this conversation to be practical because leadership presence, it is not theoretical. That presence shows up in Tuesday morning meetings. It shows up on the evening calls. It shows up everywhere. Now, early in my leadership journey, I distinctly recall going to my first leadership team meeting. And at that meeting, I felt this immense sense of pride. I felt like I had finally made it because I was in a meeting where only people with leadership in the title went. And now, when I first started going to these meetings, they would present 3 or 4 topics. They would be presented by the content owners, and they would ask for feedback. And then at the end of the meetings, they would ask us to disseminate the information or the new process, whatever it was, to our teams. Now, though it's been long enough that I do not remember the exact topics, there were definitely topics and things that were presented that did not make sense to me. I did not feel comfortable speaking up at first because I was new. And honestly, I internally thought, well, I must be missing something. Surely they have thought of anything that I could add. Surely they've been thinking about this thing that's floating through my head. And at one of my early meetings, I was still wrestling with something. And so I asked someone else about it later. And they admitted that maybe they weren't paying enough attention, but they were confused too. And also, there was an aspect of what was presented with which they did not agree. And they asked me, well, why didn't you speak up? I didn't really have an answer for them in that moment. But moving forward, As you can imagine, because I didn't fully understand and therefore didn't fully agree, I really struggled to disseminate the information. I caused more stress for myself because I felt the angst of sharing something that didn't fully make sense to me. And I had to work extra hard to do my best to make it work. So, as I reflect back, when I was in that meeting, well, why didn't I speak up? Why did I make it harder for myself? This wasn't incompetence. Instead, that was conditioning. Because medicine teaches us how to survive hierarchy. It 100% does not teach us how to hold our presence inside it. And so, what that was shrinking in leadership. Let's name what shrinking actually looks like in leadership environments. Sometimes it looks like saying, that's fine, when we all know it isn't. That might be letting a problematic comment slide. It might be agreeing publicly and disagreeing privately without ever saying something, even privately. It might be avoiding upward advocacy because it just won't change anyway, and there's no point. It also looks like overfunctioning, and sometimes it looks different. Sometimes the shrinking isn't actually silence. Sometimes it's quietly absorbing everything so that no one else is uncomfortable. Now, let's be honest. That isn't humility. That right there is self-erasure. So let me share a few examples of this. It might be a medical director who never pushes back on their increasing service demands because they don't want to, quote unquote, rock the boat. They aren't advocating for more time, resources, or incentives to get it done. They're just accepting it. Or in another scenario, it might be a faculty member or a program director who protects their residents by taking on workarounds themselves, but never takes the step of escalating the structural problems upwards. So they're just adding to their own load. It also might be a clinician who takes on the prior authorizations, the extra paperwork, the refill requests that actually have already been delegated to someone else's jobs. And they choose not to say anything because they don't want to get anyone in trouble. Or maybe they just feel like it's faster for them to do it themselves. And so they're adding to their own workload. But there's a problem when we shrink. When leaders shrink, systems stay the same. When leaders shrink, the burnout gets normalized. When leaders shrink, the silence becomes the culture. And ultimately, when we shrink, we make things far worse for ourselves. Now, this is especially important for those of us who are leaders and educators, because this becomes bigger than us. It is bigger than you. Your learners and teammates are watching everything. They are watching how you disagree. They are watching whether you tolerate inequity. They are watching whether you advocate upward. They're watching whether you will name that moral distress. Especially as an educator, you don't just teach the curriculum. You teach the posture. And if you consistently soften your presence, then they learn that that's how you get things done. They learn that shrinking is professional and the only way. Now, there have been multiple times when my learners have been surprised where they were able to speak up. A few examples that I can share that I've experienced as a program director, to which I'm sure that many can relate, are when learners have been too tired to work and don't realize or don't feel comfortable utilizing their option to hand off so that they are not worsening their health or impacting their own safety or their patients' safety. Often it's because of concern of leaning on others. There's also when learners are getting messages that aren't following the proper triage process, and they will say they thought it was because of the educational intent. And then they realize that had they said something sooner, they may have not had quite as much pajama time, or even that their pajama time may have been completely cut in half. Or when a learner gets yelled at by a specialist inappropriately, and they don't realize that I have a zero tolerance for this. and don't realize that I would have absolutely addressed it in the moment. In each of these situations, when I become aware, I go in and I handle it. And then I have an equally memorable moment where I debrief with my learner about what happened and the resources that are available. And there are a handful of different responses. Most commonly, there is a moment of genuine gratitude when they express how meaningful it is that I have their back. There is sometimes embarrassment or shame that they didn't do something or know something, and I often try to acknowledge but reframe those ideas. Sometimes these conversations also force a shift in their understanding of how culture can be different. But what is even better is when later they come back and see the ripple. When they see how that conversation, that boundary really caused a change because of not shrinking, and really can see that longer term impact 3 months, 6 months, and sometimes even a year later. They truly see and feel the greater impact. Sometimes when we shrink, we do it because of the fear. So let's talk about the fear. Because if you're listening and thinking, yes, but it's complicated to do this, then you are absolutely right. These are certainly environments where speaking up can have consequences. There are certainly cultures where hierarchy is rigid, and this is oh so true in medicine. And there are certainly systems that reward compliance. So, what I'm sharing today is not about reckless boldness. Instead, it is about discernment. And discernment requires emotional regulation. So, here is a difference between a reactive emotion and grounded advocacy. Reactive emotion says, this is ridiculous, this is unfair, this is wrong. We've all had those moments and can think about at the water cooler in the lunchroom where everybody is venting about how wrong things are. Yet, grounded advocacy looks a bit different, and it says, I've taken a breath, I have clarified my intention, and I'm choosing to speak because it aligns with patient care, sustainability, education, or equity. The reactive emotion is often about discharge, whereas the grounded advocacy, it is about impact. And the difference is often about a pause, maybe 90 seconds of a pause. Sometimes all it requires is taking a breath before responding. Sometimes it requires writing down what you want to say before you say it. Sometimes it requires having that moment of curiosity and asking that one clarifying question before offering your opinion. Discernment also means choosing the right time, the right room, and the right framing. There are conversations that belong in a large group, and there are conversations that belong one-on-one. There are conversations that belong in writing, and there are conversations that require teamwork or coalition. Leadership presence, it is strategic. It is not about saying everything that is racing through your brain. It is about saying the right thing in the right way for the right reason. And the anchoring matters. If you say, this schedule is unfair, well, that problem is centered around you. But if you say, I'm concerned about the impact this will have on continuity and resident sustainability, well, that centers the mission. And in that case, for both education and patient care, here are a few more reframes that you can consider. Instead of, this is too much work, you can try, I'm concerned about error risk and long-term retention if we continue at this pace. Instead of saying, this policy just doesn't make sense, you could try, help me understand how this aligns with our stated goals around wellness and education, or around patient outcomes, or whatever the mission that you're trying to convey is. Instead of that comment wasn't okay, try, I want to pause on that statement because I'm concerned about how it might land for members of our team. In each of these examples, you are not diluting your message. You're actually strengthening it because when your voice is tied to values and not just to a gut reaction, it is harder to dismiss. So let's talk about ego versus presence. And we have to talk about this part honestly because some physicians and other in healthcare hesitate to take up space because they don't want to be that person. We have all seen performative leadership. We have all seen visibility that occurs without substance. We have also all seen ego masquerading as advocacy. So we see those things and we don't like it. And we overcorrect. We shrink so that we are not mistaken for arrogant. But shrinking, it's not the antidote to ego. Alignment is. Ego says, look at me. Present and alignment say, this matters. Ego says validation. Presence and alignment seek impact. Ego is always loud, even when it's unnecessary. Presence can be quiet, yet still firm. Let me share something personal here. There was a period in my career where I realized that I had swung way too far into silence. I was competent, I was doing the work, and by nature, I'm an introvert, so I was quiet. And I wasn't attaching my voice to the change. Then there was a period where I swung the other direction. I was tired, I was frustrated, and I probably came in hotter than I needed to. Neither of those perspectives of me felt aligned. Yet calibrated leadership, it feels different. It feels steady. It feels intentional. It feels sustainable. It is less about winning and more about improving. And you can feel the difference in your body. When it is ego, your nervous system is activated. When it is presence, you feel grounded. Even if it is uncomfortable, that right there is your internal cue. Now, let's make this deeply practical. I want you to actually reflect. Where is it that you shrink? Is it in large cross-departmental meetings? Is it with the senior administrator? Is it around certain subjects like financial conversations? Is it when conflict starts rising? Think about this for yourself and be specific. Because shrinking is patterned. Unfortunately, patterns can be interrupted. And so here are 3 concrete actions that you can do once you realize where it is you're shrinking. The first is to speak earlier. If you wait until minute 42 of a meeting, your nervous system has built the moment into something enormous. Instead, aim to say something within the first 10 to 15 minutes. It can be small. It might be, can I ask a clarifying question? Or it might be, I'd like to add one consideration. Early contribution builds momentum, not just for you, but for others around you. The second thing that you can do is prepare one advocacy point. Before a high-stakes meeting, I want you to ask yourself, what is one thing that I may need to say? What is one thing that I may need to say? Write it down, even script it, even practice it. Leadership is not improvisation. Preparation is not weakness. And then the third is take space and make space. After you speak, you could try saying, I would love to hear from someone who hasn't been yet. Or, I'm curious how this is landing for our junior faculty. That is how you model inclusive authority. You demonstrate that power can be shared. Now, I also want to address something that makes many physician leaders deeply uncomfortable, and that is showing up externally. That might be writing, that might be posting on social media, that might be speaking publicly. It's being visible beyond your institution, because this is often another place that we shrink. We tell ourselves it's self-promotional, or it's risky, or it's unprofessional. And we may even ask ourselves, what if administration sees it? But here is the question. If physicians with integrity don't show up publicly, then who fills that space? When you think thoughtfully online about leadership, about education, about patient care, about systems gaps, you are not self-promoting. You are contributing to the professional discourse. Social media, for example, when used intentionally, is not all about ego. It is about amplification. It is even scholarship in a modern form. It is advocacy, and it is modeling. Your residents, they're already there. Your medical students are definitely there. The public is already there. The question isn't whether the conversation is happening. The question is whether grounded physician leaders are participating. And now discernment applies here too. You don't need to overshare. You don't need to react to every headline. You don't need to become polarizing in order to be impactful. But what you can do is share insights from leadership. You can normalize challenges. You can highlight systemic improvements. You can elevate other people's voices. And you can model professionalism with humanity. When physician leaders are silent publicly, the narrative about medicine gets shaped without us. Taking up space externally is an extension of our leadership presence. And yes, 100%, it can feel vulnerable. But visibility, when aligned, well, it's another form of service. Now, before we close, I want to circle back to that first leadership meeting that I mentioned. If I could go back into that room now, I wouldn't dominate it. I wouldn't try to prove myself. I would simply ask questions. I might ask, can you help me understand how this will work in practice? I'm struggling to see how this will land with my team. That's it. Not dramatic, not confrontational, just present. And that little moment of presence would have saved me stress. It would have saved my team confusion, and potentially it would have improved the plan. Medicine does not need louder leaders. It needs leaders who pause, who reflect, who align, and then they speak. If you are in leadership, formal or informal, your voice is shaping culture, whether you realize it or not. So this week, notice where you shrink. Interrupt it once. Show up once, internally or externally, with grounded presence. Because when you take up space responsibly, you aren't going to crowd others out. You are going to widen the room. And that right there is leadership. If this resonated with you, I hope you'll read my article, which I've linked in the show notes. And I hope that you will message me with where you found you were shrinking. And don't forget to join me next time for another episode of The Hidden Load. Thank you for listening to The Hidden Load. If today's conversation spoke to you, I would love for you to share it with a colleague who might need to hear it too. It's one of the simplest ways we can start shifting the culture of medicine together. And remember, your time spent reflecting here matters. You can earn free CME or CE credits for listening to today's episode through the Pinnacle app. You'll find that link in the show notes. If you are looking for one-on-one coaching support or want to dive deeper into the resources we discussed today, let's connect. You can find information on how to reach me in the show notes. And don't forget to hit subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And leave me a rating so that others can find me too. And take care of yourself because you deserve to be held up too. And I'll see you next time.